See if I can beat my record. Last time I did a presentation since last week, it was an hour and 22 minutes. I'll keep this to 22 minutes so we won't sit out in the sun getting baked. So anyway, my name is Scott Payne. I live in Deposit, New York. I am the founder of a group called Living History Tours and Presentation, where I give tours in the Mohawk, Schoharie, Susquehanna, Unadilla, any valley where anything happened with the Revolutionary War. And I do presentations. This is my 17th of the year, and I have about 3 or 4 more to go. So it's been busy because this is the big year, right?
Yes.
Get the flag out. I got the flag here. And I always pick on everybody. Okay, why? What's this?
250th anniversary.
Of what?
Our country.
Is it really?
Declaration.
Oh, it's a decoration because our country's been here for the
Well, yeah, but even as a
Native Americans were here.
what happened in 1776 is they on July 4th. What happened on July 4th?
They signed the Constitution. They signed
Declaration of
Declaration.
Wow, I get all kinds of answers. Somebody said they signed it on the July. Nobody signed it on July 4th.
Was it July? It
No,
wasn't
it
July
wasn't even
4th.
in July.
Nobody signed it on July 4th. What happened on July 4th was the First Continental Congress approved this, and it was that okay. Now what we got to do? We got to have all our delegates sign it. 56 of them. Nobody signed that document until August 2nd, 1776. So I'm making a petition at my last week's presentation. I'm petitioning now. We're going to change Independence Day to August 2nd. And you think I'll get any resistance for this?
Oh, yeah.
But then even that wasn't signed, everybody. It had to be passed around to how many colonies? 13, as far south as where? Georgia. Now of the New England states now, how many of those states now were not a colony at that time?
Maine wasn't. Maine was not. Vermont.
Want to put some money? Vermont was not one of the original first 13 colonies. Vermont was actually its own sovereign nation from 1777 till 1794. So they were their own country until 1794 when they became the 14th state. So Georgia was as far south. So when they sent this around, this took a while for everybody to sign this and then get back, and then they made copies and they were distributed. And there's only like 5 left in the country that are the original documents. So 1776 and 2026, 250 years, right? So what's going to happen next year? That's already happened. You got all these products. There was a product here. I took it because I like to collect the stuff. Hellman's mayonnaise, Heinz ketchup, and whatever French's mustard had a pack. America 250, the official logo on it. And you can get what Snapple had a special one they did called the 250 for the year here. All these products and all the stuff America 250. Next year, this stuff's already off the shelves, right? 1777, 2027. But when did the war end?
87.
89, 1779.
1783. So that's how many years? That's 7 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed. So we did not become a country that day. We didn't become a country that year. What do we have to do to become a country?
Right.
Had to go earn it, right? You declared your independence, but that was not accepted by Britain, right? That was accepted by Britain in 1783, 2 years after what? The Battle of Yorktown, right? The big battle where, what's his face there? Cornwallis surrendered, remember? Now you don't remember, but you've read about it. Hope none of you remember. And then it was 2 years later that this Treaty of Paris, because it took 2 years to hammer out the details, how are we going to do this, what's it going to be involving, and then eventually England decided, or Britain decided, okay, you're your own sovereign nation now. 1783. Then what happens in 1812? Tried to say, we kind of got a new king, or we're not so sure we let you guys go with a good idea. You know, we got a lot of money that you guys give us, right? Which was the whole point of the war to begin with, right? There was another war before the Revolutionary War, right? French and Indian War cost money. Britain won that against the French and some of the Indians. We had Indians on our side too, but they had to pay for that now. So let's start taxing everybody. Starting out with the Stamp Act in 1772, 1773, years before the Revolutionary War even started. But anyway, I said I'd take 22 minutes. I think I'm halfway done already. Just want to give you a background here, what's going on in the war in 1778, which is the year I'm going to be talking about. Anyone ever been to a place called Cherry Valley, New York?
I know about it.
You know about it. Anybody ever been there? You know where it's located? I know I'm going to tell you this thing, sorry. I'm fluffing up here. Cooperstown. Oh, Cooperstown's known for what?
Baseball Hall of Fame.
Baseball Hall of Fame, but it's also known for James Fenimore Cooper, who was named after his father, William Cooper. But just north of Cooperstown, about 12 miles, is a town called Cherry Valley, which is where William Cooper came from. Then he settled Cooperstown. But in 1778, a lot of stuff had been going on during the American Revolution in New York State, right? What do we have? Who was living here? You mentioned it. We've been here for years before we were a country. Who was here? Who was on this land right here? There's a village right out here.
Native American.
Okay, what?
The Seneca, there's the
Mohawk.
Mohawks.
See the flag over there? That purple flag hanging way down there? I had one. I had it carried around earlier, but I had no place to hang it, so you got to rely on that one. 5 nations are represented on that flag. The 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee originally that went from west to east: Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and the Mohawk. So some lived here, some lived where I live in Deposit. There's a lot of Oneida activity, but then they started, the war started, and these guys, these nations wanted to, and they don't like being called tribes, by the way. None of the American natives want to be called tribes. They're nations. They are their own individual sovereign nation, which the Oneida Indian Nation is still in existence to this very day. The Onondaga Nation, Seneca Nation, the Mohawk Nation. Cayuga is a little bit, but Oneida is a real prominent one that we talk about because of what? What did they do so importantly during the Revolutionary War? They sided with the Patriots out of all the nations, right? The Oneida
English.
and the Tuscaroras, which moved in 1722, they lived with the Oneida, settled them. They sided with us. So this is their land, right? Nobody's going to dispute that. Stanwix, Fort Stanwix Treaty of 1768, right? A line, you've heard of that? Where they divided everything east of there is for the British colonies, everything to the west you Indians can have. Well, the Oneidas got a little miffed because they cut some of their land out when they made that line. Sir William Johnson, anybody ever heard of Sir William Johnson? Yeah. Joseph Brant? Joseph Brant, more hands go up. Joseph Brant and Sir William Johnson were brother-in-laws. Joseph Brant's sister, Molly Brant, was married to Sir William Johnson up in Johnstown, New York. So, the Oneida said, well, I don't know, we want to stay neutral. Everybody wanted to stay neutral at the beginning. This is a brother against brother fight. We don't want to be involved in your brother fight, right? England and America, they're brothers. We don't want to be involved. But it's hard to be not to be involved, right? When they're coming right through your backyard, taking your what? Taking your land, killing your crops, taking and involving you in your own living room with your house. So they had to be involved. So they had to choose who we're going to side with. All but the Tuscarora and Oneida sided with the British. So then we had these things going on that what did we have today? We had a picnic, right? It's good to eat, right? Well, people got to eat to survive. Soldiers got to eat. You got to have that energy. So what they were doing with these raids, they go into a town, and they would raid. They take their food stores, they take their animals, they take prisoners if they needed to. Now I'm saying both sides did this. On the British side, we had the Butler's Rangers. Walter Butler, anybody ever heard of them? Okay, Butler's Rangers worked very closely, and over against the tree there, you'll see a picture of Tyandanego, Joseph Brant. Walter Butler and Joseph Brant worked together. They worked together. They didn't really like each other, but that happens a lot in wars, right? Your allies are not necessarily your friends. You're a friend of mine because you're an enemy of them. And that happened a lot. They did not get along very well, and they didn't get along very well with these raids because Butler was white. Brant was more educated than Butler was. Brant was very well educated. And there was animosity because, oh, you're just an Indian, and you're not going to take control over me. You're not going to be my senior, my superior. Joseph Brant was not happy with Walter Butler because had a narky attitude. He was very conceited, wanted things done his way. So they had a combative attitude towards one another. But they worked together to go raid food. It was for a common cause. Steal food, get people to come on our side, captives. So this has been going on since 77. And there was a series of raids going on back and forth, burning villages. Old Unadilla, Anaquaga, the Patriots were burning these villages where Joseph Brant knew he had headquarters there. He had a lot of food there, and plus they weren't living in longhouses at this point. They were living in structures, normal houses with glass windows, doors with locks on them, penned livestock areas. Their crops were in an area like this. They didn't have to go on these 2 or 3 month hunting and fishing journeys. Mm-hmm. If you do a study of the Haudenosaunee people, that's what they did. They went for 2 or 3 months hunting. They did all this. Now they've become Europeanized after first contact. Now they've adapted a lot of the European ways, which isn't all bad. The livestock, but there were some things that were bad that Europeans brought here during that first contact. What was one big one? Disease was a big one. They, just like anywhere, the Civil War, when these soldiers went to fight, they never been more than 20 miles from home. Now they're involved with thousands of men that are getting smallpox and all these diseases. So disease was huge. What was the second big one? It's still a problem to this day for the natives.
Alcohol.
Booze, yes, alcohol is a big one. They brought this because they could trade with them, and they liked the taste of it. They liked what it did for them, and they traded stuff to the. A lot of times they trade land for this. It was just such a bad thing. So we have this trading going on, and we have this raiding going on. Well, July 3rd, 1778, in the Wyoming Valley. Anyone ever hear of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania? Okay, Wyoming Valley is there, and that's where this raid took place, and Walter Butler led this. And it was called the Wyoming Valley Massacre, but it really was a battle because there were a lot of combatants involved. The militia was involved. 400 militia from that area were involved in this, so it was a fight back and forth. And a lot of those were killed. A lot, majority, like 95% were killed and are buried down in that area. Well, word of this got out, right? And the newspapers started writing the Monster Brant, calling Joseph Brant the Monster Brant. Kills innocent women and children in Wyoming Valley, Pennsylvania. That was the headlines from New York City all the way down to Baltimore and Washington. These were the names. But was only one problem with that.
He wasn't even there.
Joseph Brant wasn't even in the state of Pennsylvania at that time.
Oh, wow.
He was up in the Mohawk Valley raiding, doing what you do during the war, taking food, taking prisoner, taking captive, doing whatever you needed to do to provide for your armies. Walter Butler led this attack. And it was a battle back and forth. There was a lot of killed on both sides. And there were Indians involved. Seneca and the Cayuga Indian and Mohawk were the three major nations that fought for the British. And the Seneca, from Addison, right, Buffalo, that whole western part of the state, that's Seneca Lake. Seneca country, and they were ferocious, these fighters. I wouldn't want to mess with any of the Haudenosaunee nations, but if I had my choice to leave one away, I'd say the Seneca, because they were tough, and they didn't take any. There's a saying in war: no quarter, no mercy. They kill everybody, women, children, it doesn't matter. Well, they were here, but this poor Joseph Brant gets his bad name now. So then on November, how many battles are fought in the wintertime? Can you think of any in the wintertime in this Revolutionary War? We have the crossing of the Delaware right on Christmas night. You have Valley Forge, which wasn't a battle. It was just camping for where they call it camping. It's like Boy Scouts. No, it wasn't camping. It was surviving at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania during that hard winter of 77 to 78, where a majority of the guys didn't even have shoes. They left bloody footprints in the snow because their feet were bandaged, and it was just horrific. But as far as winter battles, there weren't any. So, in this place called Cherry Valley, a man named Ichabod Alden. Alden, that's a familiar name, isn't it, in history? Who was the one guy that came over on the Mayflower? John Alden. Ichabod Alden was a direct descendant of John Alden, one of the three people that came over on the Mayflower. And he was originally from Massachusetts. Mayflower, Massachusetts? Weird, isn't it? He was from Massachusetts. A majority of the men that fought during the Revolutionary War at the beginning came from New England states that came out here. You look at the Battle of Saratoga, both battles. Battle of Bennington. Anyone heard of the Battle of Bennington, Vermont? No, because it wasn't fought in Vermont. It was fought in New York State. These all were New England men. There were hardly any New York men that fought here. So when they came out for the frontier, which the frontier was farther east than here, the frontier means you don't want to go any farther west because what's out there? This wasn't a beautiful manicured park at that time, you know that. This is woods. You go out in these woods 20, 30 feet, you can't see anything in front of you. And this is how this whole area was here at that time. This is what the frontier was. You don't want to go out there because you probably won't come back. The natives did not take kindly for them going on their land. So Ichabod Alden came out by a guy who was sent him was named John Brown. Colonel John Brown. Remember John Brown? You're thinking, wait a minute, that's the wrong war, right? That's Civil War, but John Brown, this is a different one. He sent Colonel Ichabod Alden out to here to build a fort. Not out to here, out to Cherry Valley. And he built this huge stockaded fort, which was in defense of the Mohawk Valley, which is a pretty good place a key place in New York State, key place in Revolutionary War history, because you have that river system, right? No, New York City, Hudson River starts, or actually it ends. But if you come from Europe, you don't start at the end in Hudson. You start in New York City and you come up. I remember Hudson in 1600. When you get to a place called Cohoes, New York, you can cross over on the Mohawk River. Get to Rome, New York, Fort Stanwix. Anyone been to Fort Stanwix? Battle of Oriskany's right there. There's a place called the Oneida Carrying Place. You have to carry your boats. There's no river, no creek or anything. You have to get to Wood Creek, but sometimes the path is a half mile, sometimes it's 2 miles where you got to portage your canoe or your boat. Get on to Wood Creek, you can take that up to Oneida Lake to Oswego River up to Lake Ontario. Then from Lake Ontario, you can go to any place out west because it's the lake system. Lake Ontario connects to where? Lake Erie. So what that Mohawk Valley is so key. So they had a fort in Fort Plain, New York. Heard of Fort Plain? Yeah, okay, we're getting a little farther north here now. This is the Mohawk Valley. This is toward Amsterdam, Canajoharie, Palatine Bridge, all these names. So Fort Plain was a big fort up there, and this was a buffer for it. Cherry Valley was to be a buffer because the majority of the raiders were coming from the southern part of New York, like here, Anaquaga, Old Unadilla, which is modern-day Sydney, New York. They came from this area and they raided, so they wanted this buffer for it, and that's what Fort Alden was. But this guy's crazy. His name was Nicholas Sharp, and he heard that the Onondaga Nation was going to hold a council for all the nations on their side, so it'll be everybody but the Oneidas and the Tuscaroras, and they're going to decide, along with Butler's Rangers, where are we going to raid next? They burned our villages. Where are we going to raid next? This is September of 1778. Well, he climbed up into the rafters. He was a spy for the Patriots. Climbed up in the rafters of this building, and he listened to this whole meeting. What's going to happen? Make sure you don't sneeze. You're not coming out of there alive. You end up with a hatchet in your head. He comes down, gets out, goes back to a guy named Peter Gansevoort. Well, he writes a letter to him. You've heard of Peter Gansevoort? Gansevoort, New York. Commander at Fort Stanwix. And he writes to him saying, hey, I was at a meeting and I heard that the next target is going to be Cherry Valley in November. They didn't know what day in November. They said November. Which is smart because everybody that was in that fort during the summer and the spring and the fall months when there's battles are going on, now they were out in the community. They were in individual homes. Think about all the Colonel that sent everybody out, including himself and his subordinate officers. They were all staying in private residences. Now there were 2 or 3 or 10 guys in that fort to protect the case, but the majority were out. Gansevoort sent this letter to Ichabod Alden saying, hey, I've got word that they're going to be attacking Cherry Valley. You might want to take some precautions here. He didn't take any precautions. He disregarded 99% of them. He took one precaution. He sent a small unit out, and I'll talk about them in a minute, down towards Cooperstown. But he didn't believe Nicholas Sharp, because Nicholas Sharp could work both sides. And he had a nickname. He had 2 nicknames. He had an Indian nickname, which is called Lagatutai, which means he who continually speaks. You ever had that called to you? When I was in school, my English teachers used to tell me I was Lagatutai. She didn't call me that, but she used to say, oh, you got diarrhea of the mouth. See, I like to talk, so it's benefited me in the future, in later life here. But then he had another nickname. It's called Saucy Nick. So he's Lagatutai, he who continually speaks, and Saucy Nick. Saucy. When he says something, it's saucy, like he adds to it, he enlivens it, he makes up things, and he likes to talk. I don't think, he's probably working for the other side. So Ichabod Alden, I'm going to take some precautions, but I'm not going to send everybody back to the fort. Not this late. Nobody fights in the winter. Nobody wants to combat in the winter. It's hard enough to fight in the good weather, but to combat and travel in the muck and the slush and the snow, no, nobody's going to do that. You're crazy. But he did send a unit out. Small unit, about 10 guys, led by a guy named Adam Hunter. Now remember that name, Hunter. And he went down towards Cooperstown, and he checked out what was going on there, and he camped, and one morning, he woke up to somebody poking him with the barrel of their gun. I won't tell you who it is yet. I'm going to backtrack a year and go to Albany, New York. Actually, I'm going to go to German Flats, up near Mohawk and Ilion, Herkimer, that area. This guy was arrested named Walter Butler. Walter Butler was taken to Albany, which he was from that area and knew lots of people, and he could have been killed because he was considered he was a loyalist, a Tory, or a traitor. So they took him back to Albany and put him in jail. Well, he had a lot of friends in Albany, so they came to visit him, and they came up with a plan. They hatched a plan to get him out. One of his friends was a pretty girl, and they said, hey, why don't you go over there and kind of talk to that guard over there, give him a little drink, get him a little, maybe he'll pass out. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. He passed out. The other friend took Walter Butler and escaped. Went out. Back to Cherry Valley now. That guy poking the gun. Poking Adam Hunter with the gun. Adam Hunter's laying on the ground. It snowed that night. This is November 9th, 2 days before the massacre. He wakes up looking and guess who's pointing the gun at him? Walter Butler. Just a year earlier, Ed Hunter's like, wait a minute, last time I saw you, you were in jail in Albany. What? Oh, yeah, I remember that girl. Oops. So now he says, all right, Hunter, what did you know? How many are in the fort? Where are they staying? And all this. So he squealed like a pig, though. Told him, how many? Nobody's in the fort. They're very lightly guarded. Ichabod Alden staying in Wells' home, along with some subordinate officers. Over at the Dunlop house, which is Wells' father-in-law, Reverend Dunlop. He's in his home with his family. Campbell's over here in this home. He told where everybody was. So they planned, okay, now we're going to get ready and we're going to head to Cherry Valley. As they're heading to Cherry Valley, Walter Butler meets up with this guy over here. Who's this? Over in the picture, Joseph Brand. Joseph Brand's heading back to Fort Oswego, which is near Niagara Falls, or not Niagara, Fort Niagara, Niagara Falls, Buffalo area. Big area where the food, this is the whole reason they're doing these raids, is they have to feed the British Army, which a lot of them are there. Walter Butler said, you ain't going to Oswego, you're coming, or you're not going to Niagara, you're coming with me to Cherry Valley. Brand's like, I don't think so. Listen, he said, if you don't go, you won't get paid. My father, John Butler, who founded the Butler Rangers, you won't get paid. You won't get your support. You won't get your supplies. So basically, twisted Joseph Brandt's arm, says, you're coming with me. Brandt's like, all right, I'll come with you, but I'm going to go a different route. I know a better way to get there. Butler said, I don't care as long as you meet me there. You'll get there in the morning. So this was going to be a morning raid. Well, Brandt went up and around. Now, you don't know the area, right? Because you've never been to Cherry Valley, but you got to get there. There's sites you can visit. Now, on the back side of here, I had to do this a little differently than I normally do, but there's pictures of the monuments, the markers that denote the 4 biggest places that were part of the Cherry Valley Massacre. There's monuments there to depict what happened. But up at the end of north end of Otsego Lake, which is in Cooperstown, there's a place called Springfield. This is where he went. He went up this way. And he went up and around, and then he turned and went back east. No. He thought it would be easier to get there, but not realizing when he got closer to the village, he went down elevation-wise, and it was a swamp there that had been really flooded because the snow was not snow, it was like rain and snow mixed, sleet, so it was awful mucky, so it just filled it up. So it slowed him from getting there. He wanted to get there first, though, but why? Why do you think Joseph Brand wanted to get there before Walter Butler? Huh?
He wanted to get rich.
Better,
Get the booty.
Good answer.
better pickings.
As far as what?
Better pickings, yeah.
Pickings as far as what?
Alcohol.
No, food and just preserve your stuff. Women, I don't care.
Good answer, but all wrong. Joseph Brand wanted to get there because Joseph Brand knew a lot of people in Cherry Valley. He knew Wells. He knew the Dunlop. He wanted to warn them. Hey, if you're going to make me go, fine, but I'm not going to kill anybody. I'm not going to harm anybody. In fact, I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to get there before you, and I'm going to warn people. And I talked about this last week when I talked about that. I said, then they warned people. They put a mark on them. And the people were like, what kind of mark was it? Well, it wasn't a pin saying Joseph Brand says don't kill me or anything like this. It was actually a mark like charcoal out of an oven where a certain mark was put on the person's forehead. Or as we talked about shooting down in Port Jervis, the painted apron straight down there. You've heard of that. He actually took these girls and he painted on their aprons that they were going to be attacked any time now. The Senecas were coming. Yes, young girls, schoolgirls. There's an actual marker there, it's called the painted apron. And he marked people, and when they came in, the Seneca would come in. Yes, the Seneca were ferocious, and they didn't have any regard for human life, whether it was a baby or a 95-year-old person. But they saw these marks, and they knew Joseph Brand had done this. So you don't want to mess against Joseph Brand, because he had a lot of pull with the British. So they took that as, okay, don't touch, don't harm, don't do anything with these people. He couldn't get to everyone, but he got to a lot. He saved a lot of lives that day. Well, then Butler comes the other direction. He comes in. Well, he comes up and over. It's Route 166 now. Not that means anything to you, but if you ever go, that's how you get there from Cooperstown. And you go in, and the road is still there. It's part of the old Unadilla Indian Trail. Comes out onto 616 and then goes in. It's the same route. They put the road there like they've done for years, where the trail was. He came into town. The first house he hits is called the Wells House. Well, by this time, Joseph Brand has warned people on all the parts of town he knows Butler's there, and he's like, I can't do any more because if I do, he's going to see me. He's going to know I'm up to something. So he kind of gathered up and got where he could get near Butler and help him out, and that way he can keep tabs on what he's doing. I can kind of control him and his warriors the best I can. Yeah, right. So Wells home. Now, the Wells home is hilarious because Mr. Wells and his wife were friends of John Butler, Butler's Rangers. But Walter Butler's there, not John Butler. So Walter Butler either doesn't know these are his father's friends or doesn't care, or what he claimed was, I couldn't control these savage Senecas. They were just too much for me. So they come into the house, Brant's with them, and they killed everyone. They went upstairs, they killed the men, they killed the women, everybody was in that, Wells included. But one guy was there and he made a run for it. Ichabod Alden was in that house. So he takes off running. Now this is in the, I'd say the middle of the winter. It's November 11th. Takes off running toward the fort. And it's very similar to this little knoll here. When you get a chance, look down, because it kind of slopes down on this side over here. Like he ran down and he had to get, because he could see the fort. And as he's running, this is where the cops come in. An Indian takes out of the Wells house, chasing him with a tomahawk. And he says, Wells, stop! Well, Wells is, of course, scared to death. He's not going to stop, but he does stop, and he turns around with his pistol. Now, remember what it's been doing for 2 or 3 days here. It's been raining, slush, sleet. And he points his pistol at him, and he... Nothing. Takes another shot. Nothing. Just the old saying, keep your powder dry.
Yes.
You got to do that, because if these aren't bullets, these are, you got to have that pan with the flash, with the powder. The wet powder does not pop, doesn't burn. So it's just twice. Well, that's enough time for the Indian. And the Indian gets close to him and I won't go there. Throws his tomahawk, hits Alden in the head, knocks him down. The Indian runs up to him, not sure if he's dead or not, and what do you think he did? Right. Scalped him, killed him, whether he was dead before or not, but he scalped him. And it is an all sight of pretty much the whole community, all the houses. And the fort can see now their commander, Colonel Alden, is dead in the white snow. That's why I call this presentation Snow Turned Red, because it was a bloody affair, and everybody in that whole town for that whole day, remember this is first thing in the morning, all day long they could see up on that hill, there's Commander Alden dead. So it was chaos after that. For years, they didn't know who this guy was, who the Indian was. Didn't matter really, right? I mean, not really, but Alden's dead. The Indian, who was it? They found out years later, had accounts of who the Indian was, and who do you think it was? Joseph Brant. Yep, there were accounts that Joseph Brant was the one, and he was friends with Alden. Here's again, there's two sides here, brother against brother, friend against friend during the Revolutionary War. It's amazing. But he told him to stop twice. Alden felt threatened. He took a shot at him. Brant said, I felt threatened. The guy's shooting at me. So I defended myself. Then as they do, they scalped him. So then this attack takes place on the north end or south end of town, and it worked its way to the southern end, and it goes to the Dunlop house. Now the Dunlop marker's there. Like I say, come around and look at it on the back here. It's it's like 12 feet tall. It's built in the 1880s, so it's old, and it looks it, and it's needing repair, so it's pretty bad. But it tells what happened there. Dunlop's wife, Reverend Dunlop's wife, came to the door with a baby in her hand, in her arm. Now, why she answered the door, I don't know, because they knew there was something going on in town. But she went to the door, and immediately a Seneca, boom! Like I said, they were savage, they were ferocious. Killed the baby and killed her. There's been artifacts found in that area by metal detectors, and there's been pans and different metal objects that actually have the ping mark where the bullets hit. That they figure, obviously, there was no other. There was a second battle, but that was so small they just burned the fort down a year later in Cherry Valley. But this was the big one. So they figured that what else would have caused this? So they're attributing this is what happened at the Dunlop house here. Now people lived there in that house. It wasn't there at the time. But there's an apple tree right there. That's a maple tree. But there's an apple tree right by their monument. It says to the left of this monument, Seneca forces along with Butler's Tories killed the Dunlop family. And when they killed Mrs. Dunlop, they cut off her arm and they chucked it up into the tree. And there it hangs. There's now you got Alden on the ground dead and bloody. Now you got her arm. I mean, horrific stuff. And that tree there is not the original tree, but it's a descendant of that apple tree. So her arm is horrific. The Indians did horrific things to Seneca, like I say. And they had a purpose for it. The reason for it. So the Dunlop house took their resistance. Then there's a third site. And it takes place. Let's go down the back off. So when you come around back, it's on this one I did, yeah. It's on Route 166 where Alden actually, the marker shows where he actually, this happened, which it isn't where it happened. It's just on the road, close to the road, you can see it. But you can see the proximity of where this took place, as far as the elevation, the hill where he was killed. Everyone can see it. Now, where the fort was is a cemetery now. It was a cemetery then for a few bodies, but when they burned the fort in 1778, that all gone. And this was a big-sized fort. It went all the way across the road, and it was bordered by two creeks on either side. There's Cherry Valley Creek and then the Sprout Creek on the other side. So that's a huge cemetery now. Colonel Alden's buried there. He was one of the first internments during the Revolutionary War buried there. And years later, a man named Campbell, Samuel Campbell, one of his friends with the Tryon County Militia along with him, he came back. He died years later, but he was buried in Alden's, next to Alden, one of his friends. But when they dug the grave of poor Samuel Campbell, guess who caved in? Alden's grave crumbled into where Campbell's grave is. So those two are basically buried together now in a mass grave. And there are pictures back here of a mass grave marker where the killed, and they didn't give each individual plot cemetery. They were all buried in a mass grave. Their names aren't even on there. It just gives them an honor of the Cherry Valley Massacre, which occurred during this day. They're all buried in this area. There's tons of Revolutionary War soldiers buried in that cemetery. So Fort Alden is there. Was there? That was the Cherry Valley Cemetery. So this raid is over. This massacre is over. Now, why do I talk about that here? Well, because that was the final spark that caused what happened here to happen. This had been in plan since June of 1777 that we got to do something to subdue these natives that sided with Britain. Got to do something, because we know they're providing food for them, the British. They're providing people. They're providing all kinds of things. So we got to do something. So that was already in the works. But then in July, like I said, the Wyoming Valley Massacre, and then November, the Cherry Valley Massacre happened, and finally, who was the Continental Army commander? George Washington finally had it. We've got to do something about it. So in early of 1779, he started planning Sullivan Clinton campaign against the Haudenosaunee, yes. And he says, I got just the guy to do it. Horatio Gates. Remember Horatio Gates? Commander at Saratoga? Battles of Saratoga? Horatio Gates. Oh, no. Oh, I can't. Oh, I got pains. I got aches. I'm too old. I can't do it. All right, how about, let's see, Peter Gansevoort. Oh, no, I'm busy. My wife, Nathaniel Greene. He gets down to fifth choice. Hey, Colonel General Sullivan, I got just the job for you, and you were my first choice, by the way. Sullivan you never heard of, right, except for this, am I right? John Sullivan, you heard of him because of the Sullivan-Clinton expedition? You may have heard of him, but he was in everything. Everything from the Battle of Bunker Hill, Breed Hill, captured at the Battle of Germantown. He actually was captured by Germans at Germantown. That's funny, Hessians, Brunswickers, and he was actually outnumbered. And he had his pistols, and he was going to shoot them all, take them all, but they took him captive. Later on, he was exchanged for one of the British generals, and John Adams, remember that guy, right? Said, I wish they'd have shot him instead of trading him back. Did not like Sullivan. And this went on all the time. The leadership in the Continental Army, the generals, the leaders, butted heads, didn't like what this guy was doing, didn't think, right letter to George Washington. Benedict Arnold, you know what Benedict Arnold's been doing? They're always bad-mouthing Benedict Arnold about stuff. And they didn't, it's the same thing today, politics, whatever, boom. So anyway, John Sullivan's picked for this. But this isn't about the Sullivan-Clinton expedition, but this is what happened. This is the only major battle took place here. And it was a direct result of what happened in Cherry Valley. Washington said, we've got to squelch this. We've got to subdue these natives from providing tons of food, and they provided tons. Do you realize how much, when they went up through the Finger Lakes, we're talking about the grapes and all this, the vineyards up in the Finger Lakes region? There was strawberries, peaches, apples, watermelons, cantaloupes, things like this. They were huge. You think of the Three Sisters as the only crops the Iroquois, but there was tons of other food that they provided. So they burned thousands, when I talk about thousands, 200,000 or 300,000 bushels of crops. Burned over 40 villages. Got to Geneva, which is that time it was called Canada's Vega. Then I know you folks out there heard of Geneseo, right? Geneseo, Letchworth State Park. But you know what Kylerville is? Kylerville is just a little place just past Geneseo, and there's a place there called the Torture Tree. You've heard of the Torture Tree, right? Very tail end of the Sullivan expedition. I won't tell you the details, but it's called the Torture Tree for a reason. This is what happens when you disobey your commander's orders. Sullivan told him, do not go, just go scouting. Do not initiate, do not engage the enemy. Especially when the enemy's who? Seneca Indians. This is right in their heartland now. Geneseo was the largest Seneca village at that time. Huge. They saw 4 riders coming on horses. Oh, let's take care of them. There were 30 of them. Hey, poor guys, we could take care of them. And they shot, and they got one guy. 3 escaped and went back. They went back to Yeniseo, the huge village. Well, they don't care. They keep going. And they realize that they are, you know what the Seneca used for their war paint, what color it is? They could see it right on this hill. This is what happened. This is what gave the Seneca away from hiding up in trees. Bright red. Sometimes I do this presentation when I paint my face all red with black around my eyes and my lips, and then I have earrings and nose ring and stuff. My wife's like, you don't even look like you. You're scary. I'm like, that's what they wanted to use, a fear tactic. And that's how they saw these guys up in trees here, the Patriots. Oh, red guy. Well, who's the red face? Obviously, it's the Seneca. Well, they look around. They're surrounded by all these Senecas. And there was 35, maybe 40 of them. And they were led by an Oneida named Han Yost. And Han Yost was the first to go. And when I say go, I don't mean they treated you nicely. Because Han Yost was considered a traitor to them. You sided with the British, or the English, or the Patriots, because you were an Oneida. And then this guys named Parker and Boyd, who were the head of this expedition, decided we're going to go and, well, they ended up getting the worst of it at the torture tree. So if you want to look that up, go ahead. I'm not going to give any of the gory details, but it was horrific. What happens if you disobeyed Sullivan? Sullivan obeyed his orders, what Washington had him do. Now you get to the end of all this. Some say it was a genocidal expedition, right? George Washington hated Indians. George Washington wanted to kill all those natives, except the Oneidas, which he loved. Is that true? Yeah, to a point. Is that it? He didn't want to kill them. He wanted to get rid of their food sources for the British is his main thing. And he said, if at all possible, make peace with them. But the Indians, the Senecas and the Cayugas, they kept running. They'd go from one village, and then they'd go to the next. They warn, they're coming. They'd get to a village, and they'd say, look at this. There's a pot over the cooking fire, still hot. They just left 2 minutes ago, and they're going up and up, but they realize they only got so far to run. They only got so many people that can go with them. They're not going to have a huge army like Sullivan had. So I always ask at the end of the presentations, was George Washington a hero or a zero? And then I get, well, it depends on what side you're on, right? You ask the Seneca Indians or the Mohawk Indians, he's probably a zero. You ask the Oneidas, he was the best. He was a hero. Now, the Seneca came up with a name. Actually, it's funny. The 6 nations, even the Oneidas, called the president at that time, they called George Washington a nickname. You know what it is? I can't tell you in their native because it's like 18 letters long, but it means town destroyer. And you can understand that, right?
Yeah.
Starting way down, he burned, they killed. You know, George Washington wasn't there physically, but he initiated this. All these villages, town destroyer. But to this day, now what number are we up to now, President? 46? 47? 47. From everyone up, from George Washington, I can go through the list, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, John Quincy, blah, blah, blah. 16th president, right? Abraham Lincoln, all the way up to, who's president now? Everyone is not called the president of the United States. It's called town destroyer. Now, wait a minute. Donald Trump, I don't think, I might be wrong. Joe Biden, Obama, Clinton, go back and back and back, you know. I don't think any of these guys engaged in a battle or a mission or an expedition to come up and burn the Seneca and the Cayugas out of their homes, did they? Not that we know of, but that's the name given. That's synonymous with President of the United States, town destroyer. And you think about it, it does make sense, because where are these Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, where are they living now? That's right. They're not technically reservations, but they're Oneida, like the Oneida Indian Nation in Oneida and Verona and that area of New York have a lot of land that's been repatriated to them, given back to them. But Onondaga, what's the big city there? Syracuse. You can't give the city back. And they acknowledge that this is stolen land. The Seneca, you know, the people of the politics of the, Syracuse say, we realize that now. What do you want us to do? And the Onondaga say, nothing, we can't. What are you going to do? Give us your building? We don't want your building. We don't want your paved roads. We don't want the carrier dome or whatever it's called now. We just want to be acknowledged and told that, hey, this was taken from us wrongfully. This was taken from us illegally. Oneidas are getting land back. The Mohawks are in the Schoharie Valley are getting a lot of land back. Up in Fonda, New York, a lot of Mohawk land. Seneca land down in the Salamanca, the Allegheny Reservation. They don't want, they're still there. So did this work? This genocidal expedition by George Washington didn't work, did it? Because you have pure-blooded Mohawk, Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Tuscaroras to this day, pure-blooded. So we talk about this, what you got, you took our land illegally. But there was one thing that was kept in 1794. Now I know you girls over here know where Canandaigua is. You ever hear of the Treaty of Canandaigua? Yes. 1794. Every year they have a commemoration. That's funny because that's on November 11th as well. And this was what land you're going to get. And there were representatives from all 6 nations. The last time that all 6 nations were represented together at one time. After this, they crumbled. It started crumbling during the war, but really now it was the Onondaga, where Syracuse had the fire, council fire actually was put out. But the one treaty that they kept to this very day, and I don't have it with me. Doesn't matter. Imagine I have a piece of cloth up here, about the size of a handkerchief. They made a cloth treaty with all the nations, and they said for every nation you're going to get a certain allotment of money for cloth. Now, back in 1794, cloth was important. They didn't make drapes or they didn't make hankies out of it. What did they use it for? They used clothing. They weren't dressing in buckskins and loincloths and things like that. They were in America, they were Europe, and they made clothes. So they were like, wow, great. But as the years went by, that amount stayed the same, right? Let's say it was $20,000 per nation. Now, that was in 1794, $20,000 in 2026. Not much. But they're still giving each nation that money. And they send them the cloth. And I spoke with a lady, we went up to Oneida, the Oneida Indian Nation, and she's the head of the center up there, and she said, it's worthless. You can't use it to make anything. It's not big enough. It's basically for a back of a photograph or a picture frame. It's like chintz type material. Yeah, and she says, every year they send it. UPS, FedEx, comes in a box or a package, padded envelope. She said, they don't even deliver it. No local representative can come and deliver a package with the material in it, and we distribute it to each member of our nation. But every year they also say, hey, can't we just end this? Can't we just pay each nation a figure? How about $100,000? I'm using a number. I don't know what it is, but how about we pay each nation $100,000? We'll forget this. They won't do it. She says, we don't care if that material person is the size of a postage stamp. Because we want the U.S. government to know every year that they do this, that the United States government kept one of their treaties they made with the Native Americans. That the land they stole, you admit you stole land, now this is what we get. I don't care, but it's going to be a reminder to whoever sends it. You got this land illegally by ill-gotten gain. So, what are you going to pay us for it? I don't know. You can't put a price on it. But anyway. Okay, so there. End of the war's coming, right? Not yet. Got 1779. You got 4 more years. 2 more years of fighting, and then they battle Yorktown, but then you got 2 more. So really, independence didn't happen until 1783. So Cherry Valley was a big thing. The Sullivan Clinton expedition was supposed to really kill the Indian from their helping the British, which didn't. We talked about this earlier. Sugar Bush Raid, 1780, over in Harpersfield, New York, the other end of Delaware County. You had all this stuff going on in the Mohawk Valley. You had a lot of your big battles hadn't even taken place yet, 1776, when the signing had taken place. You had Lexington and Concord, Bunker Hill, Breedsville in 75, but after that, a lot of stuff. Big battle, 77, Saratoga battle, Saratoga campaign, all that was after the Declaration, and they were still fighting and fighting and fighting. And any questions? No questions, comments, ideas?
I have a question.
Yes.
When was the Battle of Oriskany?
That was on August 16th, 1778. 1777, sorry, you got me, 77.
Okay.
Was part of the Saratoga campaign.
Okay.
Yep. So next year's the big one. 250 for that one. Fort Stanwix is right nearby there. They're like 5 miles apart. Yep.
So the Battle of Newtown
Yes.
was the beginning of the Sullivan Clinton campaign going up.
Well, it was the biggest battle of the Sullivan Clinton expedition. It started way down, like I said, in Cooperstown. They burned everything Clinton burned everything he could, up, all the way up. Sullivan was down in Wyalusing, Pennsylvania, came up to Athens. Then Fort Sullivan was built in his honor. They both came up and met right down the road here. I say right down the road, 10 or 15 miles. Chemung, Tioga. Chemung was burned, Tioga, blah, blah, blah. They get here and they meet resistance from Butler and Grant and all their men. But like I said, they saw their red faces and it kind of, oh dear, we know they're here. It was supposed to be an ambush. The Indians like to ambush. And it wheeled around this way. You're supposed to keep going, but it wheeled around and came up. People say, why'd they fight on a hill? Well, actually, it started down where the highway is, and along the Chemung River down here. And then it ultimately went up this way, and then it kind of went a little more west, and then ended up going up Watkins Glen, Ithaca, Seneca Lake, and then up that whole lake. This wasn't the start of it, but this is the biggest event of it. As far as the battles go, there were other skirmishes all along the whole thing. But this is the biggest battle of that campaign.
But they beat Grant.
They beat Grant. They beat Butler. Yeah, they went up and they were warning the villages, hey, Sullivan and Clinton are on their way. They'd go. And they hoped they'd muster up enough, but there wasn't enough force to resist. So they just kept going and going farther north, and then finally farther west. And it just pithered out, like I say, in Tylerville, in that area. They were trying to get to Fort Niagara. Now this is almost the end of September. Well, they got to go all the way to Niagara, and then come all the way back down, and come back down to where they started from. They didn't have time because of the weather. If they started in the spring, it might have been a totally different campaign, but this was later in the year, so they decided to squelch it. And once they got to Tylerville and they saw Parker and Boyd slaughtered and everything there, they said, heck with it. Well, they came down and they wiped everybody out. They knew they were safe. So then they fanned out. Instead of going up one column up Seneca Lake, where Hector is in that area, they fanned out, and a bunch of units went between these lakes. Some came down between Cayuga and Seneca Lake, Canisius Lake, Canandaigua Lake, and they went, anything that was left, they wiped out. But then they got to a place just a little ways from here. They had these horses, pack mules. Yeah. They were thin, they were gaunt, they were poor things. So the best thing they could do was put them out of their misery. Well, they killed them all and they left them there. War ended, the Indians came back. I thought we wiped the Indians out. Nope, Seneca, Cayuga are still here. They come back and like, what in the world? They see all these bleached bones all over the place. So they took all the skulls and they lined them up. Well, after the war ended in the early, 1783, so by 1790, 1800, now how does the government pay these soldiers? Giving them land. So they get this land given to them, and whoever settled that area says, what in the world? What are doing with all these horse heads doing here? There you go. This day, Horseheads is still the name of the town. So Newtown was the name of Elmira. Where did Elmira come from? One of the first mayors of Elmira, of the town here, daughter's name was Elmira. You thought it was Mark Twain, didn't you? Mark Twain got a big connection with Elmira. Painted post. Right, that's another has to do with the treaty and things that were signed there. They had a post that was up with a red mark at the top.
Oh, okay.
That's a Seneca Indian thing too, yes. Painted post still there. People like Horseheads, that's got to be the weirdest name. So that's how that got from, yes, Horseheads. And then they went back to their own lives and they went back to fighting and the war was not over. And before Indians lost a lot of food, the British lost a lot of food. At the Fort Oswego and Fort Niagara, there was a lot of starvation, a lot of freezing there. 77 to 78 was the year of Valley Forge. Remember that winter with George Washington? That was not the worst winter. The next winter, 78 into 79, was worse than that one. And then these guys are in 79 to 80. No food, no clothes. When Sonny planted, they planted enough for 3 years of food. Now, everything's gone, not just for this season, but for 2 more after. So, wasn't a knockout. You had knocked them down, but they got up. So, okay, any other questions?
How many men were in did he have in the expedition? How many men?
It's all about 2,000 to 3,000.
And how did he feed them?
They brought provisions with them. And they get whatever they got. What they did was, and it's funny you talk about this, when they got up to Canandaigua Lake, Canandaigua has a twin lake called Honeoye Lake. They say when they got there, they left their sick and they're lazy, and the people live in Canandaigua say, yeah, and they're still there. They do not like it's funny because the people I know, their families with both ways, like, yeah, they're still there, lazy people hunting them, but they did store food as they went up to get on the return trip, knowing. Actually, in Montour Falls, you know where that is, just north of Mount Watkins Glen, actually, one lady was there, a lady, I don't know what it is because I'm way over time already. The women were the matrilineal system, the Haudenosaunee. They were the ones in charge, the women. Well, they get to Montour Falls, and there was a woman there. They say what you want about John Sullivan.
Catherine.
But Catherine?
That was the name of the woman.
That's right, Catherine's town. They left her alone. They left her enough food for the months. They didn't know when they were coming back through. Left her enough food. Didn't burn her house. Did everything else. About how Parker and Boyd came back down, get to Montour Falls here. They went and saw her, make sure she was okay. They give her more food. She comes out of her house, an older Native American. Her and John Sullivan talking. Now these are soldiers writing this. They met, they talked, they're hugging each other. The soldiers are crying, John Sullivan's crying, she's crying, all this, in the midst of this chaos and this horrible, brutal killing and burning and pillaging and whatever. There's this act of two enemies that are showing compassion and, love for one another as fellow human beings. So an amazing part of that expedition was that. And that's how the food, they left her more food because they didn't know what was going to happen after they left. So yeah. Quite an expedition, quite a thing to take food when you go on something like that. You don't know how long it's going to take. You don't know what you're going to encounter. So, okay. Anything
Very
else?
interesting.
Very good.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Okay, appreciate it. Now everybody sit still.
What a trove of information.
Hey, sit still.